Chapter 9. Here is the point in the story that gets a lot of eyebrow raises every time I tell it. Not the ballroom dancing with manatees, since that does nothing to rouse the spirit. But it's my dropping everything to run home like I had a bad case of diarrhea that looks suspicious. I'm not saying it doesn't at least a little, but what if it had been diarrhea? What was I supposed to do? Never mind, let me explain. I didn't run home because I was afraid of blowing my cover, or because Kelly's driving made my life flash before my eyes. As stupid as it sounds, I ran because it was a great day. It was a jump up and clack your heels together with glee, Frank Sinatra's I've got the world on a string kind of day, and I just wanted to tell someone. Kelly doesn't know this, but I wasn't going to be late for dinner. I had some time to kill, so I stopped to fill in my faithful, dessert-loving friend, Crocker. True to his weakness, I found him sitting on his front step, once again, gobbling down something sweet. "Laken, how was your first official day on the job?" he muttered, with a mouthful of peach cobbler. "I'll put it to you this way, my friend. Why don't you grab yourself another slice, because we are celebrating." I laughed as I twirled around. "That good, huh?" he snickered, swallowing his helping. "Man, if I told you about the day I just had, you wouldn't believe me," I replied, falling into the grass, looking up at the sky. "The best thing about it is, I think I'm in love." "That was fast, but don't you think she's a little old for you?" he joked, while wrestling to get another bite on his spoon. "Not with Gilleigh. She has a granddaughter, Kelly," I corrected, propping myself up on my forearms. "She's the most amazing girl in the world." "So ask her out on a date," he said in a logical tone. "Are you crazy?" I replied in shock. "I can't do that. I only met her this morning." "Oh, excuse me. I forgot that claiming to be in love with this girl from my lawn was somehow less crazy," Crocker scoffed. "What do you think comes before the marriage and the baby carriage? It's what we're supposed to do. It's the natural order of things. Now look, what you gotta do is take her to the drive-in on a night we show scary movies. Buy her popcorn and all kinds of treats and things to make sure she gets lulled into a false sense of security, and when it inevitably terrifies her, you'll be the big, strong man she needs to chase the monsters away." "Oh, please, Crocker. This isn't Wonder Woman we're talking about here. This is real life," I scolded doubtfully. "I know it is. But if Wonder Woman or any other of the lovely dames from the super community were here, I'd be taking them to see a scary movie," he defended. "Right, you're gonna protect a superhero from Dracula?" I questioned with a smirk. "Alright, okay, maybe my fantasy is a little hard to picture, but you have a real shot at making something happen here. I'm telling you, I've seen it 1,000 times, he clarified with confidence. "You don't have to ask her out tomorrow or next week, but... Edwin, honey, you better not be into my peach cobbler. You'll spoil your dinner." Mrs. Darby called out from the house, interrupting him. Looking down guiltily at his plate, Crocker said aloud, "Well, that's my cue to head in," before ending our talk with this piece of wisdom. "But seriously, though, plant the seed of romance and let it grow into something beautiful. Then, take that beautiful flower and scare the pants off it. It's how love works, man. Think about it." I walked the rest of the way home, laughing over the professor of love's advice, not covering what should be done if my seed of romance, as he put it, grew into a weed. I thought about asking my dad for his expertise, what he would do if he were me, but of course I couldn't. So I stuck a pin in it for now, and got through dinner just like every other night. I stitched together a drab-sounding overview of my day, so they wouldn't be interested, and saved the real victory of the day for Lottie and me to share at bedtime, my pay. "Hey kiddo, I got something to show you," I whispered as I pulled the envelope from my bag. "Can Andy see too?" she asked, putting herself under the covers. "That depends." "Can he keep it to himself?" I questioned back in a grin. "Laken, he's a turtle. Who's he gonna tell?" she answered back, clearly in no mood for my humor. "Good point," I conceded, fanning out the bills in front of her. "Wow, that's the most dollars I've ever seen in my whole life," she exclaimed, her gawking making her forget to be quiet. "What are you going to do with it?" she asked when she remembered to whisper again. "See, I've been thinking about that. Mom and Dad can't know that all this money came from me, right? So I was planning on sneaking it into the mailbox to make it look like it came from somewhere else. Was as far as I got before Lottie's wheels started to turn. "Sort of like a tooth fairy?" she added to the thought. "Exactly like a tooth fairy," I approved. "But without the teeth under your pillow and the neat holes to stick your tongue through." That made us both laugh, which reminded me that I had one more surprise to give. "Hey, I got something else for you," I said, letting her curiosity build before laying my drawings from the Loch in her lap. "I drew these for you. There's a lot of cool nature to see where I work. Do you think I could maybe see them in real life sometime?" She asked, wearing a smile that got bigger and bigger with each new drawing. "Yeah, maybe," I answered, absent-mindedly watching her thumb through the pages, although I was taken aback when she stopped at the one of Kelly. I hadn't intended on leaving that one in the pile. "Who is this?" asked Lottie innocently. "A new friend I made at work this morning," I stammered. "Maybe you'll get to meet her someday too." "Do you like her?" she pressed further. "Yeah, I think I do," I chuckled. "She has a pretty smile. It's friendly, just like Mommy's. So I think I could like her too," she said angelically, delicately stroking the lines that made up Kelly's face. "That's good, Half-Pint," I whispered as I took the drawings away, and she closed her eyes. It was just me alone with that stupid picture now. I think a normal person would just throw it on the desk and probably forget about it in favor of dreaming of the girl in it until a new day could bring them together again. But not me. I was too overcome with inspiration to put it down. I studied the way she looked out at the loch and the animals from the other pictures, and soon a tale that wasn't even there began to emerge, and the rabbit that hid in the foreground of it all was going to tell it. I didn't give him a name at the time, or really know what he was doing there, but I drew him again and again, over and over in different positions, wearing different expressions, until it felt like I created him, like he was mine. Then he came to life. Chapter 10. June rolled into July in precisely the way it should have, or should I say, the way I hoped for. The rowboat project was nearly finished, the money was still coming in anonymously, even my rabbit found himself in a full-fledged book, and a name too. I decided on Babbitt Pennycotton, more commonly called Babbitt the Rabbit. If I wasn't my worst critic, it would have been done entire days before I admitted it was. Even then, it hid on my desk for a few more while I practically begged myself to be certain there was nothing more to be done to it. Now, I don't know why, but the day that this chapter starts felt like one for things to happen. Whether they were good, bad, or in the middle, I wasn't sure, but the feeling alone was enough to make up my mind. So, the book went into my bag and came with me in case of an impromptu unveiling. I just wish someone warned me about Kelly. I was at the bus stop about to board when a vehicle bearing Chuck Berry's brown-eyed handsome man parked behind it. After it honked at me, I saw her behind the wheel of yet another dream car from her family's apparently ever-growing collection. This time, it was a maroon 1957 Chevy Bel Air convertible. "You comin', son? We've got places to be," the bus driver said, while I stood awkwardly in the way of his doors. "Something tells me no, sir," I answered apologetically, stepping away from the curb. I had no time to change my mind either, because as soon as those doors shut, the bus pulled away and left me alone with Kelly, who was now leaning against the hood of her car. "What shed did you find this baby buried in?" I joked as I approached. "It's mine. Do you like it?" she asked, with a hint of pride in her voice. "Yeah, I can definitely see why you didn't want to haul the supplies for the boat in her," I replied, giving it a closer look. "You have got to stop drooling over these cars," she teased, rolling her eyes. "Come on, help me put the top down." The weather wasn't the best for it, but it's what you do when you're driving down the road with the tunes cranked in a car like that. The ridiculous amount of cool that comes with passing strangers in a convertible was almost enough to make me forget how concerned I was to see Kelly at the bus stop, and we made it through a song or two before I turned down the radio and asked, "What are you doing here, by the way?" This was met with an annoyed-sounding scoff. "What, is driving my car to or around where you get picked up to go to work against the law?" "No, never mind," I dismissed, trying to change the subject. "No, hey, since we're asking each other questions here, I've got one for you. What's your secret?" she asked in increasing annoyance. "I don't know what you," I tried to deflect. "Don't lie to me," she cut me off. "You don't think I notice how you start your day carefree, like you lose track of time, only to then rush home in a panic at around the same time every day, like your house is on fire or something?" "I already told you, dinner is," I defended weakly. "No dinner is that urgent," she asserted. "How about you never let me give you a ride home? It's like you, don't want me to see where you live. Even just now, I could see how uncomfortable you were that I just showed up. It's obvious you're hiding something, Laken, and I want to know what it is. If I had to guess, I'd say that your family doesn't know you have this job working for my Nan." I let out a huge sigh and let the truth slip out, knowing that it was the only thing she'd believe now. "That's 'cause they don't, and I'm not supposed to." I know she could sense the quivering shame I felt, but she didn't care. She stared right through it, wanting only a deeper, honest explanation. "My dad was one of the layoffs from the factory. There never really is a great time for these things to happen, but it made our situation all the more complicated. He's been looking for work ever since it happened, and he'd kill me if he found out. But I borrowed his newspaper, found the ad, and had to take the job in secret." "So wait, where do your parents think you go all day?" she asked, her intense tone becoming inquisitive. "Gallivanting around with my friend Crocker," I smirked before adding. Excuse me. "He's the only one that knows about this besides you and Lottie. Her involvement kills me the most, though. She gave up her favorite piggy bank just so I could pay my way back and forth." "I'm so sorry. I had no idea," Kelly said, seeming saddened. "Aren't you scared of getting caught?" "Like you wouldn't believe," I chuckled. "But I'm doing what I have to." "What about the pay that you get from Nan? Where do they think that comes from?" she investigated further. "From a kind Samaritan in the mail." I clenched my jaw, expecting a dam to break from the answer. "Unbelievable," she giggled in disbelief. "I want in." "You what?" I stammered, in disbelief of my own. "I want to join the team," she restated. "Let me help. Let me pick you up from the bus stop and bring you to work. That way, I won't rouse any suspicions with your folks, and you'll be able to stop feeling guilty for spending your sister's allowance to ride the stupid bus. 2 birds, 1 stone. That is an excellent point. And I suppose you know too much for me not to let you in," I pretended to ponder. "Getaway driver it is, then." "So, does being part of this club mean I get to know what that is?" she asked, seeing the book in the bag in my lap. "This is top secret information. A little project of my own I've been working on. Real need to know kind of stuff," I replied, trying my best to sound mysterious. "Well, lucky for you, I really need to know," she said while trying to snipe the book away from me and keep her eyes on the road. Hey, it's a book. I'll show it to you later, if you can be patient," I bargained, fending off her intrusive arm. "Well, I can't be, so how about we trade information?" she proposed. "You show me your book, and I'll show you a sneak peek of how our project is progressing." "I just saw it yesterday, and the day before that, and every day since we started. How is that a fair trade?" I argued. "Oh, trust me, you're gonna want to see this," she countered, feeling elusive. Kelly was absolutely right. I did want to see it. It's awe-inspiring what 4 hands and 2 kindred spirits can do with enough time, the right tools, and a vision. We rebuilt a priceless childhood memento, made it strong again. We sanded it until it was buttery smooth to the touch, and it was completely painted. The top half was forest green to match the old Ford, while the bottom half was an eggshell white. This was not how I left it. "You did it," I muttered under my breath. "I stayed late last night to finish painting so it would be dry by the time you came back," Kelly said softly. She seemed antsy during my inspection, chewing on her nails like she was worried I wouldn't approve of what she'd done. "All we have to do now is see if it floats," she added as I stopped at the words written on the side. "The Tretichus," I read aloud. "What is this?" "That is the name of this vessel," she answered, as though she was waiting for me to ask. "Yeah, but what does it mean?" I questioned, sensing she had done something clever that I was missing. "I honestly have no idea," she shrugged. "Remember how we couldn't think of a word that described our experience swimming in the Loch that day? Well, I couldn't think of one either, so I just made one up. I suppose it could mean whatever we want it to, since there are no rules for fake words. But I figured since we were using it for the same day that we stumbled onto this project, it would be a good name for it. Then, like that day, this boat shall likewise be called Tretichus," I declared, commending her thoughtfulness. "I'm glad you said that, 'cause I wasn't really planning on repainting it," she teased, deflating my compliment in the process. "I think we're ready for her maiden voyage," I chuckled, trying to recover from the slight sting. "Oh, let me go get Nan. She'll want to see this," she replied barely before taking off for the house in an excited sprint. The emotion that came next, however, I'm not sure even Tretichus could cover. When we carried our restoration out of the shed and Gilleigh saw it, she burst into tearful laughter. She made no effort to disguise or stop herself. She just put her hands over her face and cried. It made for a touching bon voyage when we put it in the water. Funny thing was, our test was cut short on account of it beginning to rain. before we could make it out of the shallows. But that didn't stop her from cheering loud enough for the whole village to know we were seaworthy. I think what really wrapped the whole event in a bow labeled special was that we never mentioned it again. To this day, I normally skip over that part, decorate it with some made-up mumbo-jumbo where Kelly and I pretend to be pirates. It's just not something that needs to be discussed, you know? We built a boat that meant a lot to her and her family. She approved, and that was that. The three of us were there to share in the truth of that moment, as it became our memory forever. One safely tucked away boat and reconverted car later, the rain picked up steam. The first clap of thunder scared the cripes out of us, practically making us jump into a new part of the house. The main living room was more open than the study, with furniture arranged in front of a large rock and mortar fireplace, which filled the space where a television might go. With outdoor chores rendered inaccessible and the indoor ones inessential, there was little choice but to wait out the weather. We did so with conversation, sharing tidbits of memories and telling jokes. It was either somewhere between late afternoon and early evening, or after the fourth or fifth pot of tea before Gilleigh addressed the world outside our little circle. "It doesn't seem to want to clear up out there," she said disappointingly, watching the drops run down the window. "It sure doesn't," I agreed, overanalyzing the dark stains at the bottom of my cup. "Why the long faces, you two?" Kelly intercepted. "Nan, do you remember what Granddad used to do on days like this?" "How could I forget, dearie?" she began. "He'd get a book from his study and read it to you. By firelight, if it was late enough. He thought it would distract you from all the racket outside, make it seem less scary. He always expected to look down and find you curled up at his feet, but instead there'd be a pair of big, beautiful eyes driving the story onward, no matter how tired he was. When those stories didn't work, you'd crawl into his lap and make one up together." "Did he ever write them down?" I asked. "His mind was his paper," she answered. "I don't know how he kept them all straight up there, but he never missed a word. He used to say he was waiting for the day he got old and started forgetting things, but—" "Hoping for some inspiration there, Mr. Author?" Kelly cut in. "Nope, I started to reply innocently. "So, you're a writer," Gilleigh stated, awaiting confirmation. "I like to write, but—" I tried to inform. "But you could transcribe them," she stated further, obviously deciding against waiting. "I suppose I could if I reasoned. "Oh, please, Nan. He doesn't want to do that when he's got books of his own to worry about, like the one in his bag," Kelly pointed out while walking over to the fireplace. The glare I gave the announcement was met with a satisfied expression. "Does he now?" Gilleigh chuckled, picking up on the minor tension between us. "I do," I sighed. With the cat out of the bag, so to speak, I lifted the book and held it out for her to take. "Read it to us," she refused. The wagging of an upright finger acted like a witch's wand, a spell possessing the fireplace while it ignited spontaneously at her command. It startled me a fair bit, but she applauded Kelly's timing on the trick as she settled into both her chair and the ambience. The room was ghostly silent when I looked up, excusing the crackling logs in the fire. I searched for an indication of how I did, but only found faraway smiles on the faces of my audience. The orange and yellow flickers looked to have hypnotized them into a waking dream. "What did you think?" I asked Gilleigh, hoping to see some signs of life. Without saying a word, she stood up and marched out of the room. It wasn't really the type of reaction you'd want your hard work to receive, but I digress. The creaking of an opening closet and fumbling with objects of various weight were the next sounds to be heard. I didn't know what I triggered, and Kelly, who was still dazed and motionless in her chair, didn't give me a lot to go on. But when she found what she was searching for, she called out, "Laken, take a seat at the table, would you? And no peeking." The walk to the adjoining dining room was deliberately slow, so I could curse at the book and figure out what it had gotten us into. It felt like I was stepping into the middle of a good cop, bad cop routine in noir. Having to sit alone at the end of a table that was long enough to land a plane on was prep for the interrogation, and soon Gilleigh would produce some form of evidence and ask me questions like, where was I on the night of, and why did I do it? I calmed myself enough to close my eyes, since she asked me not to peek, but it wasn't long before a harsh, artificial light was thrown in my eyes, and there was a hefty thud in front of me. Imagine my face when I realized there was a tan Royal Companion typewriter staring at me. "A typewriter, Miss Gilleigh?" I asked in curious relief. "For you and Babbitt, when you two decide what he's going to do next," she answered. "You want me to write another book?" I asked, doing my best to understand. "Another book, and however many more you can come up with," she clarified happily. "Laken, that timid creature is the key to a perspective of a whole new world that exists in my very own backyard. I love it, and I don't want to miss a single page of it, which is why I'm going to be here to see it done." "Right here? When would I have time to do that?" I chuckled doubtfully. "You'll make the time," she said plainly. "I believe one of the rules of your job is to do what I ask. So, when I don't have you out and about doing some daft errand or chore, I expect to hear your fingers tickling those keys." "So, you're making writing part of my job now?" I deduced. "A measure of the faith I have in my new favorite, long-eared, mustachioed gentleman, and the mind behind him," she finalized. "Thank you, Miss Gilleigh. I don't know how to repay you." Excuse me. I choked on my gratitude. "Say you'll come to dinner," she offered. A completely unrelated topic, but I'm planning a dinner party, sort of a midsummer celebration for friends and family. I'd be honored if you and yours would be our guests. I guess I wasn't meant to get too attached to the confidence boost that the beginning of this discussion had given me, because by this time it had been sucked out of the room with the rest of the oxygen. This was the bad cop part of the script. You know, the part where he talks until he hits a raw nerve that makes the person of interest tattle on themselves. Now, Gilleigh wouldn't do that. She had no idea what made asking my parents so scary, but she had me on the ropes. I probably would have babbled the whole secret if it hadn't been for Kelly arriving to bail me out. "Come on, Frankenstein, let's go find you a village to torture," she said, putting a hand on my shoulder and escorting me out of the room. "Oh, but you will ask them, won't you?" Gilleigh returned, sounding hopeful. "I'm sure he will, Nan," Kelly answered on my behalf, between the groans and screams and the torches and pitchforks. "I understand the nickname Frankenstein, but I've always been unsure of whether it comes from how I moved down the hallway with the coordination of a dozen or so different people all trying to get control, or how I would have sounded through the vocabulary of a confused abomination had I answered Gilleigh. Anyway, my living corpse was shoved into the sunroom, away from the prying eyes of the angry mob. "What the heck was that? Did you know about this?" I shouted under my breath. "Yeah, about the dinner. And I figured she'd want to invite you, but your parents were a curveball." Kelly answered sincerely. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I sighed, begging myself to think clearly. "Well, you're not actually going to ask your parents, are you?" she asked skeptically. "What else can I do?" I barked. "The appropriate thing to do here is to say that my family and I would love to come to dinner. If I don't, there's a chance she could be offended or catch on that my folks don't know. I'll just have to find a way to convince them to attend without telling them the real reason why. It'll be risky, but it might work." "All right, so what would you say has better odds? The crazy story you're going to have to weave, or being struck by lightning?" she proposed randomly. "That's got to be a tie, since bad luck means I'm probably dead either way, right?" I chuckled. "Why do you ask?" "Because I really, really don't want to be electrocuted for this," she responded, kicking off her shoes. She, the barefooted bullet, then proceeded to run out into the rain. At first, it made her shriek when it hit her skin, but after a while, it made for laughter. Laughter and dancing. It wasn't until she noticed me watching her from the doorway that she stopped. "You're still alive," I called out over the rain. "Huh, I guess that means I'm lucky," she shrugged. "I hope it's contagious," I joked before joining her inside the cloudburst. I once asked Kelly what possessed her to run out of the house that day. She told me that she wanted to be a distraction from the stress of having to talk to Mom and Dad, no matter how brief. As far as I'm concerned, she was. She got both my feet on the ground with flashes ever present above me, but I wasn't being smited. Sure, I was relieved to not be deep fried, but her point was that maybe my chances with the dinner party were better than I thought. It left me with a pretty great feeling that I used to lasso Kelly, pull her in close, and lead her in a slow dance. Of course, without a record player handy, we had to hum the first tune that popped into our heads. The selection of the evening was Sam Cooke's "You Send Me." I didn't have a lot of experience, but I didn't step on her toes, and my hands didn't wander awkwardly. I even ended the song with the classic dip, which was a segue to the classic explanation point, the kiss. If you're anything like the others, you've been anticipating this moment. And just like with all the others, I'll suggest that you hold in the urges to cheer and applaud until after you hear the next part. The passion and the hormones were raging as her warm eyes invited me closer. Our lips were about to touch, and then came a spooky ahem that killed the mood. Now, we've been there. We all know what a bummer it is when adults catch us being teenagers. But when I recognized that gothic silhouette underneath that ungodly umbrella in the doorway, I think being eaten by a zombie would have been a less terrible fate. "Mother, Kelly started, springing back to a vertical position. "Have bloody well lost my mind." Gordana finished mockingly. We were just dancing, Kelly explained nervously. Oh, please, darling, I'm not blind to what you were just doing. Gordana replied arrogantly. You should be thankful I interrupted when I did. You'll catch your death out here, soaked to the bone like that, stupid girl. Maybe I should leave, I said, wanting to avoid the squabble. I'll drive you, Kelly added in agreement. I think not, Kelina. Gordana declined. The only place you'll be going is inside to dry off and say goodnight to your Nan, then straight home. Meanwhile, I'll see to it that Mr. Adams gets home safely. Being in a car with Gordana was like being forced into tight confines with a hungry lion, so safely was an ironic word to use. Our trip begins with me mistakenly assuming that I was going to make it out of there without discussing how she caught me trying to kiss her daughter. As it turned out, she had a colorful opinion of the subject. What do you think of my daughter, Mr. Adams? Honestly, she inquired. I think she's great. She's beautiful, intelligent, I started enthusiastically. And do you know why I stopped you from kissing her tonight? She asked over me. No, ma'am, I answered, pushing away my true thoughts. I did it because, frankly, I don't think you're good enough for her. She spoke bluntly. I wish there was a politer way to put it, but there just isn't. I know you think your little infatuation is harmless, but you've stepped out of where you belong, and now her fraternizing with the help is turning into something that may damage her. The standard of life she deserves is far, far above you, and I refuse to see her lower it within your reach, just because something as fragile and disappointing as love tells her to. Doesn't her happiness count for anything? I asked, futilely. The happiness she feels with you is a false convenience. It's only because she hasn't yet realized the potential of a future without you in it. She fired back. I know it's hard to hear, but it's best to nip this in the bud for both of you. You understand, don't you? The lion had been waiting to bare her teeth like this, putting my self-worth through a meat grinder just because she could. She relished in Gilleigh not being there to forbid the cruel and demeaning things that came to her mind. She used the opportunity to the fullest, saying everything she wanted and smiling afterward like it never happened. I went along with it for a while and told her what she wanted to hear, but I was also plotting my escape. Due to the weather, it wasn't going to be as easy as asking her to pull over and walking the rest of the way home. So I needed something that was equal parts creative and unexpected. My timing needed to be exact, my reflexes keen. I glanced out of the corner of my eye and saw that we were passing the bus stop. That was my cue. Rather than answer Gordana's condescending question, I opened the door and leaped out of the moving Oldsmobile. How's that for a cliffhanger? And that is where we are going to tie off this chapter for this episode, guys. End this episode for now. We ran a little bit long, but things are getting really exciting, as you can hopefully tell. Things are getting really intense and heating up. So I hope you enjoyed it, and don't mind this longer episode as we move into the next one. And so I will see you there, hopefully. Until next time, guys, we'll see you later.